So let's talk about this whole scenario with the Philippines caught right between the massive US China competition.
Yeah, it's fascinating and also a bit nerve wracking to see how the political dynamics are evolving there, right?
Absolutely. What really stands out is the ICC arrest of Duterte's and how that incident rippled across Philippine politics.
Right, that arrest kind of shook up the political landscape, didn't it? I mean, it wasn't just about legal proceedings, it had broader implications.
Exactly. And then you see how the Marcos government, in response, is trying to shift its international positioning by practically handing itself over as the linchpin in the US strategy to contain China.
Yeah, that move is pretty bold. But isn't it a bit risky to rely so heavily on catering to one superpower, though?
Yes, it is risky. It's like playing a high stakes game of chess with your neighbors. Your moves have reverberations far beyond your own board.
Right. And don't you think positioning as the pivotal partner for the US could backfire, especially if China ramps up its own activities in the region?
For sure. That's the crux of the dilemma. By leaning so heavily into the US orbit, the Philippines might alienate China, which is already a major economic partner.
Yeah. What seems to be the underlying driver here? Is it just, pure geopolitical pressure, or are there domestic factors at play as well?
Oh, it's definitely a mix. Domestically, there's an element of national pride and a struggle for power, especially in the aftermath of high profile incidents like Duterte's ICC situation.
Yeah, right. Because you have these political actors trying to use external pressures to sort of consolidate internal power.
Exactly. And by aligning closely with the US, the current administration tries to legitimize its stance and distract from internal controversies.
It reminds me a bit of how sometimes global threats get used by governments as a sort of rallying cry, even when the actual interests of the people might be sidelined.
Totally. It's a classic political maneuver. And while on one hand the Philippines gets the support of a major ally, on the other hand it courts the ire of, well, China's sphere of
Yeah, right.
influence.
Which then spirals into this complex balancing act. But let me ask, don't you find it somewhat problematic that this kind of maneuver might reduce the Philippines to just a pawn in a larger geopolitical game?
I do see that risk. And it's an excellent point. Almost like willingly stepping into a role where you're being used by powers much bigger than yourself.
Yes, exactly. That seems like a double edged sword. Aligning with a superpower might bring like security guarantees, but at the cost of autonomy.
Precisely. And this is where the discussion of the ICC arrest becomes more than just a legal issue. It's a catalyst for this broader strategic realignment.
On the one hand, the ICC aftermath exposed some serious governance issues. On the other, it gave the administration an opportunity to redirect the narrative toward national security, right?
Exactly. It's almost like they deliberately frame the events to justify a pivot towards more aggressive foreign policy measures.
Right. And this framing plays directly into the broader US China narrative, the US portraying itself as the defender of liberal democracies versus a rising authoritarian China.
Yes, that's the narrative at play. The Philippines becomes a sort of litmus test for this global strategic contest.
But here's what puzzles me. Isn't it a bit convenient for the Marcos government to just shift blame onto international pressures instead of addressing domestic issues?
You're right. It does feel like a convenient diversion, a way to mask internal political shortcomings by shifting focus to an external threat.
Yeah, and that in turn makes it tougher for the opposition to rally legitimate homegrown support because the conversation is dominated by global strategies instead of local needs.
Absolutely. It creates this environment where critical domestic debates are overshadowed by the larger, almost cinematic narrative of US China rivalry.
Definitely. Almost like a geopolitical blockbuster, except the stakes are, real lives and national sovereignty.
Exactly. That's the heavy reality behind all these theatrics. It's not just abstract chess moves, it's about how ordinary people face instability when major powers tug in opposite directions.
Yeah. And then, if you think about it, there's also economic pressure. The Philippines economy is deeply entangled with both, which makes the balancing act even more nuanced.
Right, the government has to essentially manage economic ties on two very different fronts. One, with the vast US market and military support, and two, with China as a huge investor and trade partner.
Exactly. So, it's not merely a strategic or ideological dilemma, it's also about securing economic survival amidst a shifting global order.
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope where a single misstep can lead to enormous consequences both politically and economically.
That analogy really hits the mark. But I do wonder, is there any viable middle path for the Philippines? Or is it inevitably forced to choose one side over the other?
That's the million-dollar question. In theory, a balanced, independent foreign policy would be ideal, but in practice, the pressure from both superpowers makes neutrality nearly impossible.
Yeah, exactly. And this dynamic, in a sense, reflects a broader trend we see globally, where regional players are caught in the wake of superpower rivalry.
Right, it's not isolated. Think of it like being caught in the middle of two tectonic plates. One misalignment can lead to an earthquake that shakes up everything.
And while that might be a vivid metaphor, it does raise some concerns about whether the local leadership truly has the autonomy to decide its own path.
You nailed it. There's a real tension between appearing autonomous and the reality of relying on external strategies to solve internal problems.
Yeah, right. In the end, it seems like the Philippines is at a crossroads where every decision will have significant fallout, both for its regional role and internal stability.
Exactly. And that's what makes this situation so uniquely complicated. It's a blend of legal, political, and economic pressures, all converging in one geopolitical hotspot.
It really makes you think about what sovereignty means in today's interconnected world, doesn't it?
It does indeed. And while the narrative may seem prepackaged for external consumption, the real story unfolds on the ground, with consequences for millions of lives.
Yeah, totally. Well, this has been an eye-opening discussion. It's clear that the balancing act the Philippines faces is not just about aligning with one global power. It's about navigating a world of competing interests that are as complex as they are formidable.
Absolutely. And hopefully, as this situation continues to evolve, there'll be more room for independent decision making that prioritizes the nation's own long term interests.
Indeed.